Welcome to Hamburgers and Horror, the home of meat, monsters, and even more meat. I'm Noah Hook, and today we're looking at Aamis, otherwise known as Ravening in English. This 2019 horror romance from India follows a lonely married woman who bonds with a younger man over their shared love of unusual foods. As their excursions become more adventurous, their relationship begins to take a very dark turn. Ravening was written and directed by Bhaskar Hazarika, an Indian filmmaker who has brought us films like The River of Fables and Latrani. The film was written and performed in Assamese, a language mostly spoken in the northeastern Indian state of Assam. I've tried to watch as many interviews as possible and do my own research, but I apologize in advance as there will probably be a few instances in this video where my pronunciation leaves a bit to be desired. The film stars a pair of sisters named Lima and Nitali Das as Nirmali and Jumi respectively, Argadeep Barua as Simon, and Sagar Sarab as Elias. The cinematography was handled by Rihu Das of films like All That Breathes and LSD2, and the score was composed by Kwan Bay of Second Chance. Ravening premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival before being released in India, and it eventually won Best Director at the Singapore South Asian Film Festival. It's been met really positively by critics who have praised its slow burn story and subtle political messages. It currently has an 88 and 83% on Rotten Tomatoes, as well as a 3.7 on Letterboxd, so Ravening seems to have a lot of love. Thank you so much to my patron Minnie for requesting it for me to review. I had never heard of Ravening before, and myself, as well as I assume a lot of other, at least American audiences, are pretty unfamiliar with Indian horror, so I'm excited to share and discuss a piece of it here. But with all of that said, it's probably time we get started. I hope y'all are hungry, because we're watching Ravening. The movie opens in Assam, where a woman named Nirmali is dropping off her funny little boy named Piku at the bus stop. That day, she helps patients at her clinic and spends the evening with her son as well. Meanwhile, a young man named Suman is living it up with the boys, cooking them a homemade meal by the river. That's cute. Fortunately, we don't have to waste any time for these two to meet, as Suman swings by the clinic because his buddy is having tummy troubles. She reluctantly looks him over despite the clinic being closed that day, and we learn the friend is a vegetarian who tried meat for the first time. Little homie's just got indigestion. Suman explains that he's part of a meat-eating club at his university, who are devoted to buying live animals, slaughtering, preparing, and eating them to ensure the utmost quality. Nice. Nirmali opts not to take any payment, requesting a sample of the meat club's next meal. He warns her it may be something exotic, but she's down to clown. Suman plays some soccer against the world's worst goalie, listens to his friend's bestiality joke, and expresses his appreciation for the nice doctor he met. Nirmali meets up with her friend Jumi, who's going on and on about the hot man she's cheating with. Nirmali looks over the overly processed food in disappointment, and we learn she's also disappointed in her long-distance marriage with a man named Dilip. He works in the countryside and is rarely home. Nirmali agrees to lie to Jumi's husband to cover for her tomorrow, and Suman joins his friend Elias for a wild rabbit dinner he's invited to. He saves some and drops it off to Nirmali, who fucking loves it. She doesn't eat meat with her fingers due to fear of infection, but Suman takes no offense. He's starting his PhD researching the meat-eating traditions in northeastern India. So this is like Suman's whole thing, it's his whole personality, huh? She questions whether the average person could live up to the meat club's strict rules, but Suman argues that there are lots of hole-in-the-wall spots that serve the good shit. Elias is sussed out by his friend's infatuation with a married woman, but Suman argues that their relationship is purely platonic. That late-night texting might say otherwise, though. Bruh. At lunch, he tells a story of how his father made him slaughter his pet chicken as a child, and it seems Suman felt very little remorse about the creature's life. He politely sits in front with the chauffeur and entertains the two with his research on an insect that people eat and also use as a hallucinogen. Now Suman is passing up opportunities to travel and conduct research. Bro is down bad and distracted from his work, his friends, and everything that isn't eating with Nirmali. She shares that when eating with Suman, she strangely only wants to eat meat. Jumi has noticed her friend has been distracted as well, and she reveals that she's having a not-so affair with a foodie. She swears she doesn't have romantic feelings for him, but she knows his feelings are growing. She decides to put a stop to this relationship, but then they see a play together. Okay. She does tell him her husband is coming home tomorrow, and Suman asks what the deal between them even is. Nirmali does not answer. Well, that clears things up. Dilip surprises his wife a night early, but the poor fool makes the mistake of cooking this carnivorous queen some yams for dinner. Yams? What were you thinking? Where's the fucking meat? Poor Dilip finds Nirmali scarfing down meat after his soy boy dinner. Simone decides to visit his parents for a bit, and Elias is happy to see he's willing to get away from this woman he's been obsessing over. Simone says he loves her, although it can't be an affair since the two haven't touched. Right. Totally not an affair then. Oh, but fucking Nirmali invites his ass to dinner, so Simone ditches his schoolwork like a child. He arrives and meets Jumi, and is introduced to Dilip and his man friends. Jumi worries that Dilip will catch on to Simone's crush, and Loverboy gets pissy when the other men aren't excited about eating leeches. Oh lord, he's sniffing her clothes now. He does receive more audience at dinner, where he prattles on about the big wide world of animals you can eat. Nirmali loves it. Dilip is quickly off to another village for work just days later, and Nirmali grows tired of her husband's constant absence. So she returns the favor and hits up her little boo thing to eat some bat meat. How romantic. Oh, you almost touched her. How brave. She calls up Jumi to cover her tracks, and the homie is happy to lie to her uncaring husband as well. They eat their flying rodents, and Nirmali gets dropped off a couple blocks away to avoid being seen with Suman. Loverboy tells Elias about his inability to touch Nirmali while he does surgery on a dog, but he's excited that she leaned in for the moment to even let him. Elias thinks he is simply desperate to find something that isn't there, but he's a bit too distracted to listen. That night he has a very strange dream about Nirmali, and she coldly sees her husband off the next morning. Simon returns to Elias with an insane request, asking his friend to surgically remove a piece of meat from him for his research. Big quotation marks around research. I mean, bro code clearly indicates that a homie in need of a meat retrieval must be assisted, so the licensed veterinarian cuts a little chunk out of him. As you may have guessed, that shit ain't for science though. This fucking freak cooks it up and stuffs a hard-boiled egg with it. He drops it off at Nirmali's work, and she chows down on the delicious mystery egg. She asks him what kind of meat it was, but Simone opts to tell her in person. Oh yeah, a coffee shop is the perfect place to tell your crush you've turned her into a cannibal. She doesn't take the news well, but at least she didn't call the authorities. Nirmali goes from disgusted to appreciative, and by the time Simone finds her, she straight up forgives him. Well, alright then. Now she's just on a weekly diet of Simone meat, I guess. Elias, my man, you gotta stop. There won't be anything left of him soon. Alright, I'll admit the kebab looks pretty good. Oh my god, Nirmali does return the favor, but it seems Suman is more of a cooker than an eater. As time passes, Nirmali yearns for larger portions of human flesh, believing it to be the fundamental flavor of life. She starts imagining Suman's lil meat jar everywhere she goes, and she fears her hunger will never be satisfied. She asks if there are any restaurants that serve human flesh, but the hobbling king wants her hunger all for himself. He asks Elias to lop off one of his toes, and the vet has finally caught on to the fact he is cooking and serving himself. Simone explains that this is merely an experiment. He wanted to learn if there were ways to be physical with your lover that weren't sexual. Oh, well when you put it like that, it makes perfect sense. Elias has had enough of this madness and tells him to leave, and when Sumon tries to cut himself, he gives the maniac a bitch slap. Meanwhile, Jumi is preggers with her side piece's baby. Uh-oh. Aw man, a pregnant friend and no meat tonight? Life sure is tough, huh, Normali? She calls Sumon over to the hospital so they can raid the fucking morgue, Jesus Christ! Even Sumon is freaked out by her desperation, but Queen declares that she will eat good tonight. Fortunately, someone enters, so her depravity will have to be postponed. He points out all the cameras that would have captured their crime, and Normali declares that she is going nuts. Well, she's at least right about one thing. On their way home, she argues that she's actually suffering from acute addictions, which has two possible solutions. She can wean herself off and suffer for months, or she can eat her fill and simply be over it. Not sure that's how that works. She ponders the best way to kill someone, and Sumon reluctantly agrees to help her. He promises to kill someone and deliver the meat tonight. He ignores a call from Elias and begins stalking the streets, buying a big ol' knife to cut the pieces they'll need. He ultimately targets a rickshaw driver and manages to strangle the poor guy to death. He goes full Leatherface in an alley, not noticing a police officer investigating the abandoned rickshaw. Sumon bolts but is quickly captured, and Normali's dumbass texts him while he's being interrogated. She wonders why he hasn't answered, but doesn't have to for long as she's quickly arrested. Damn, the media already knows as well, and their cannibalistic love story is breaking news. Elias rushes over to Simon's to see the police bagging his little veterinary jars, sorry King, and Dilip learns the awful truth via phone call, double sorry King. Bro, y'all should not be letting Piku watch this. Bad cannibal, bad. The two have their heads bagged so they can be presented to the media, which is wild in so many regards, but the two use this moment to finally hold hands. And they lived happily ever after. And that's Ravening. Whew, this was a weird one. Definitely don't go into it expecting a straight up horror movie. It's not really out to scare you, although you will be horrified by the things that are taking place in the story. It's kind of similar to my recent review of The Baby, where The Ravening is telling this really fucked up story, but doing it in the most deceptive and mundane way possible. This looks, sounds, and feels like a crappy Lifetime movie for the first 30 minutes, and I think that's a purposeful choice. It disguises itself as a typical romance early on to lull the viewer into a sense of security before the darker twists and turns reveal themselves. I appreciate that the film remained very grounded in reality, both in the relationship and the violence. There are no traditional grand gestures or ultimatums, and there is no unrealistic, brutal crime spree. It helps to keep you from guessing exactly where the story's gonna go next. This particular form of cannibalism isn't something I've seen in a film before, and my god, it made me so uncomfortable. Giving pieces of yourself is often used as a metaphor for love, but these two have taken it to a very literal extreme. Sumon's argument that normal isn't universal rings true, as he and Normali found their own unique way of expressing their love. It's so strange because on one end, aside from the murder part, the cannibalism isn't that big of a deal within the grand scope of what could happen in a horror movie. It's all consensual and supposedly in the name of love. But on the other hand, it's absolutely insane, and I have more trouble justifying it than murdering the rickshaw driver. The idea of using an X-Acto knife to cut a little chunk out of myself just makes me fucking queasy. But within the larger canon of cannibal movies, which is one of my favorite horror subgenres, I'm not sure that Ravening has what it takes to stand out for me. It's just a subgenre we've been getting a lot of really fantastic films in, especially ones that have a romantic angle to them. Raw, Bones and All, and Fresh are three that come to mind, and I'd argue that all three exude more style, violence, character development, and probably just as many political undertones. I think I'm holding the film up to a pretty high standard, which probably just isn't fair for it, but I also really didn't feel connected to any of these characters, which for something that is so dialogue and character heavy, I feel like is pretty important. The only one I felt a bit for was Nirmali, but that sympathy quickly dissipated in the second act. It wasn't like the decision to eat people was some great challenge she was mentally and morally struggling with. She ate one fucking piece. It was like, oh, well, actually, that's okay. Like, what? And my bigger issue is I simply don't see the charm of Sumon. All bro knows how to do is yap about eating bugs and monkeys. I think he and Liver King would get along fine, but I need him to have a little bit more charisma and sympathy to make for a really good love interest for Nirmali. I was really excited when we got that midway dream sequence and was hoping the film would take a more experimental approach from that point forward. Its happy, glowy Lifetime aesthetic does darken and dampen as the story gets more bleak, but I wanted it to get weirder. I do think the cinematography is lovely though, especially in the moments of food preparation and cooking. Just like a good meal, the film takes time to slowly build flavor and unravel its story. I think it had the potential to be a really great pressure cooker kind of film that bubbles and bubbles before eventually exploding. Unfortunately, I feel like some of that pressure was either lost in translation or was just never there at all. I never felt nervousness or anxiety or panic from the main characters or anyone around in this world. Even that final moment where he's murdering the rickshaw driver just felt very low stakes to me. The technical aspects like the sound design and camera work didn't ever quite catch up to the severity of the actions that Sumon and Nirmali were doing. All in all though, Ravening is a very interesting rom-com that was left in the pantry a bit too long and left to spoil. Just when you think its themes around infidelity are the crux of the film, you start to see a weird hobby transcend into obsession and watch as it devolves into violence. If you're in the mood for something in between a Hallmark drama and A24 horror with a little bit of Chef's Table mixed in there, I think The Ravening will be right up your alley. I'll admit that certain elements fell a little bit short for me, but overall I really did enjoy the watch and I did not know where the film was going throughout. And it seems a lot of people really love this film. It might be a bit of an acquired taste, so I'll definitely be revisiting it to see if my palate has changed at all in the future. Well, that's about it. Thank you so much to my patron Minnie for requesting Ravening for me to review. You always give me very strange and unique films. A lot of the times things that usually don't get covered on horror channels or sometimes are completely overlooked by audiences. So I'm always really excited to see what you pick for me to cover here. But have any of y'all seen The Ravening? If so, please let me know down below. I'd love to talk about it. And be sure to join me in 2 weeks as we check out another patron request. Thank you all so much for joining me, and an extra thank you to my patrons. As always, I'm Noah Hook, and thanks for watching Hamburgers and Horror. Stay safe out there. Thanks for watching my review of Ravening. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe so you can keep up with all my horror reviews, and if you want to help support the channel further, you should check out my Patreon account. You'll be able to vote for future movies and franchises I cover on the channel. Thanks y'all.